अगर बहुत लैग हो जाता है तो विल स्टॉप, विल नॉट। छोटा टॉपिक है इसलिए कर सकते हैं। Is there any way to stop it? We'll start in a minute. मॅडम यूट्यूब लाईक केलंय, ऑफिसमध्ये स्टाफला चेक करा सांगा. हां, सगळ्यांनी चेक करा कसं दिसतंय, चेक करा.
ओके ओके ठीक आहे.
ओके. Hello everybody. Today's topic for discussion is concept of logging. Now, almost every language we require this feature of logging. Rather, in every application we have to log certain things. A lot of times we have misconception only errors needs to be logged, while that's not very true. So let's see as to how we can go ahead doing this particular logging when it comes to Java. Java has a very good support, and there are several third-party libraries which are also available for the purpose of logging. Today we'll be exploring one such kind of library which comes bundled along with JDK. We will not be exploring the third-party APIs which are available for the logging purpose. We'll go ahead with inbuilt support that Java provides for the purpose of logging. That is what we'll be exploring today. So when something goes wrong in an application, that's the first thing that comes to our mind. So we'd like to record what was the reason, what has gone wrong, that we would like to record. Now, while I'm saying why we would like to record, we'll have to keep a log of it. Now, when I say log of it, means we'll have to physically maintain that information. We have done exception handling earlier. Now, while we are doing exception handling, life was easy. Why am I saying so? Because while we did exception handling, exceptions were displayed either on the console, or you could just take up a dialog box, exception will get displayed, you respond to that, and then that's done. But suppose you are a user and something goes wrong at your end, and then I'm required to, as a developer, I'm required to rectify that particular problem. How do I know what was that you are doing when something had gone wrong? How do I get the record of it? Is user going to capture the screen when the error message have been displayed onto the screen? Now that's something which is not appropriate, or rather it will not be possible. So if something goes wrong, we would like to keep a record of what has gone wrong, when did it go wrong, what was the state of the system when the things were happening, working. So we would like to keep a log of it. The logging is critical for every application, because application development may be one-time activity, but application maintenance is lifetime activity. And while during the maintenance, logging will be a critical piece of information that every maintenance guy will require. Java developers have a choice of several logging libraries. One of the most popular logging libraries available from Apache, that log4j. But what we will be using today is not the third-party library that is log4j, although it is very popular. What we'll be using is java.util.logging. This is a built-in logging framework which is bundled in your SDK or in your JDK. Now, since it is built-in and bundled in your JDK, we'll be rather focusing on this java.util.logging. Now, if you look at this API, This API was introduced in a package that is java.util.login. Again comes util package. And I have been telling you right from day one, util is one package that you cannot just ignore. All the kind of support that you require, most of the most widely used APIs in Java, you'll find them including this util package. It facilitates software servicing and maintenance at the customer site by producing log report suitable for analysis by the end user, system administrator, field service engineer, and software development team. Now think about it. You are a developer, something goes wrong at the client's end, you visit the client's place or you take a remote of the client space, and what are you going to do? Are you plan to recreate that circumstances when the system has failed? How do you ever also know what is that is not working appropriately in the system? What was the cause of the failure? What happened? Which function call really triggered that particular failure? Now that's impossible for you to recreate at times those scenarios. And you cannot ask the client to be watching. He is the end user. He has nothing to do with how the application, he is concerned with the result, how that application behaves. He's not going to keep a track of all the information as to what he may at the most make his best attempt to tell you what was he doing when the things go wrong. But then that may not be enough of information for you when the application is large and we'd like to pinpoint and find out which particular class, which method call had actually failed. We do exception handling, but then even in exception handling, we said it is not a good practice or good idea to display the entire stack trace onto the console because that will give a very wrong impression to the client. Now you're not going to print it onto the console because the client will have a wrong impression about you. And then you as a development guy, you as a software maintenance team person, how are you going to understand what is the cause of the failure? There is where logging comes into picture. Though it facilitates software servicing and maintenance. So if you really want to provide support, if you really want to maintain the software, there is no other alternative than having support for this logging API. Logging API captures information such as security failures, configuration errors, bottlenecks, or the bugs in the application or the platform. So when they say capture information means what? It will actually physically permanently store that information somewhere on the secondary storage device so that you can go back to that particular piece of information, or it may not always be stored on the secondary storage device, but it will be persistent. It may be transmitted across network. Think about a scenario. You have a client. There is one installation that you have done of your system at the client's place, and if something goes wrong on the client's machine, and you are reported on the in your company as to this is the problem that has occurred on the client machine, without even the client, even before the client calls you back and tells you, "Arey, the system has failed, something has gone wrong, there is some bottleneck." Would it not be nice if you proactively, without the knowledge of the user or with the knowledge of the user, did the maintenance of the software which is being installed the client's end? But for that, it is to be reported to you. Today, logging has gone to such an extent. It is not just about keeping a log file that you normally see when you do some installation. There is a log file that is getting created and stored on your disk. It is going much beyond that. Here, there are scenarios where the client is running the system, the application, and then something goes wrong at the client's end. A report for error message is generated or flashed on the developer side, the maintenance team, so that they can immediately provide support for that particular client. Core package includes support for delivery plain text or XML format. Normally, what we have been looking at till date is plain text. But if the messages are quite big and you would like to quickly parse those things, XML is the preferred format. If the data was displayed in XML format, I could immediately pinpoint and find out critical points or time when the error has occurred. It would be easy for me to parse that particular information. Plus, this XML data or plain text can also pass to any firewall. But then if it is formatted, that's all the more better. So you can have the plain text, you can have XML formatted log records in the memory. You can have records in the memory, in the output stream, console files, sockets, and logging API can interact with n number of logging services that already exist on the host operating system. Your operating system may also be having some support for logging. And if you really want to utilize that particular feature that your operating system is providing, that can also be taken into use. So here, this logging API can integrate with the third-party APIs which are there. It can send the information and store it in the memory, but then that information not persistent. It can store it into a file for secondary storage device. It can send it to a socket, that means over a network. So this log record of the thing can actually be transmitted anywhere. If you look at this architecture, what we are going to look at, the logging API, which is provided to us in util package, there will be this logging API that I'll be exploring to you until. This logging API has an opportunity to interact with the logging services that probably your operating system is providing. Idea, very purpose of having this logging API is to create a log report for analysis. Now this log report, now don't think about log report is always about errors. Huh? Log reports can be about bottlenecks. That means there is a function that you are trying to call. Every time you call a function, that function was expected to give you result within a specific time interval. If the time interval is exceeded, that means there is a lag, and that is not acceptable. So would you not like to keep a log of it? So it could be about performance, it could be about errors, it could otherwise be daily record. That means who logged into the system, who logged out of the system, who made some changes to the system. We would like to keep a record. Which are the user, which services did you access? There are any confidential data that somebody made an attempt to access. So entire information could have been logged in these reports. So this logging API helps you to identify the security failure, the configuration error, the performance bottlenecks, and even the bugs. For the bugs, it is compulsory. Now, whether for performance bottlenecks or configuration errors or security failures, you would like to log or not. For bugs, though, you should log. But security failures, something, some constraint has been violated. So would you not like to record it so that we know some part of your application is trying to do something where you do not have enough of permissions? So all that information should be logged physically so that the software maintenance team can revisit that particular log and take a corrective action. So how do you go ahead using this logging API? The task that outlines the steps to be performed to use logging API are as follows. First, we create a logger object. So today I'll be showing you step by step. So I'll just keep a simplistic diagram and then we'll go ahead with the details. First, we need to have a logger object. Now, when we say logger object, the first thing that comes to mind, oh, is that going to log? Hold on. Don't reach to a conclusion immediately. But first, we require a logger object. Then we need to configure the logger object. Now, when I use the word configure the logger object is responsibility to log. That's okay for the end user. But we need to configure. Configure means we need to specify what is it going to log, how is it going to log, what kind of messages should it ignore. So there is some configuration that we have to do for that logger object. And I'll tell you about what configuration that we need to do or we should be doing with the logger object. So first, we create a logger object. Then we configure the logger object, and then we send the message to the logger object. We are sending the message to the logger object. Now, whatever message that we send to the logger object, we expect that message to get logged. We expect that message to get logged. So create a logger object first, configure the logger object second, and send the message to the logger object. And all these things should be a part of your application. So every application that you design henceforth should have a support for logging. A logger object can be created by using static method of the logger class. So this logger class has a method called as getLogger. This method getLogger creates a logger object and return to you. But does it always create a logger object? No. This getLogger method takes a parameter, and that's a string. If the logger with that name is already existing, it will return you an existing logger. And if it is not existing, it will create a new logger and return it to you. So finds or creates. If it finds an existing logger, it will return you the reference to the same existing logger. And if it does not find an existing logger, it will create a new logger and provide you. So once we get the logger, if the logger already has been created with a given name, it is returned. The logger will be returned as it is. And if it is not there, it will create a new logger. So there is this method called as getLogger. The return type of this method is logger. So we are not going to say new logger. No, we are going to use this factory. And we are always going to ask this logger class, say logger.getLogger, and you pass the name. So what is the name? It will first search for that particular name. Is there a logger with that name already existing? If it is existing, it will return. And if it is not existing, it will create a new logger. Here I go. I say logger.getLogger package.class. Now it's a common practice. Different loggers may take up responsibility of logging different parts of your application. In your application, there can be 4 or 5 different packages, user different packages. And within that packages, say we are 4 of us. I am there, Rohan is there, Rutuja is there, Rameshwar is there. We are heading different groups and we are responsible for handling that package. So maybe I have created the logger in a different way, configured the logger in a different way, and Rutuja has configured the logger in a different way, and Rohan has configured the logger in a different way, and Yash has configured the logger in a different way. So for each of their package, they may have created a logger, and that logger will log that particular thing. So would I not like to identify that logger with a particular name? So if I create a package called as rishi.class, so I'll say rishi.class, whatever package name, rishi.package, whatever it is. So normally, what is the package name? That name you could give. Don't worry about .class, because now that we have seen reflective access, the moment you say .class, what comes to our mind as if I'm getting the class object? No. Here it's just a name. So it could be A logger which is responsible for logging the activities of a class. So give the class name. It could be a logger which is responsible for logging the activities of any class inside the package. Give the name to the logger as a package name. Or it could be the application, only one logger. Then give the name of the application itself. It's just a naming convention. You could give any name. In our examples, you'll find me giving me any name to the logger object. But if the logger object is existing, but it makes sense, you can have multiple loggers within the same application. So give some meaningful names so that we identify which part of the activity is this logger responsible for logging, recording. Logging, you can think about it as like recording. So first we have to create a logger object. And second step, once we have created the logger object, the second step that we are supposed to look into was configuring. What exactly do we mean by configuring the logger? What is the configuration that we need to do? So what is the configuration? Associating a handler with the logger object. So you and me as a developer who will be using this logger object, they will only be sending the message to the logger. They are not really concerned about how is the logger going to log. So the application developer, he will only send the message to the logger and he is expecting the logger should log that particular thing. Logger should record that particular information the way the person has configured that particular logger. The creator of the logger has configured that logger. But it is not actually the logger which is actually going to log. We send the message to the logger. It is the responsibility of the logger to log. Okay, but logger does not log on its own. Logger forwards that message to something called as handler. So handler responds to the request of the logger and does the actual logging. So actual logging is not done by the logger, it is done with the handler. So would you not like to have an handler associated with the logger? So I'm sending a message to the logger, and if the logger doesn't have a handler, that is never going to happen. Huh? Even if you do not know about the handlers and you send the message to the logger, it has a default handler. So when you do not give your own handler specifying how to log, the logger API, the logging API over here has a default handler. I'll name that particular default handler for you. That's a console handler, and that displays the message onto the console. Haven't you seen that whenever an exception is being generated and that exception messages are coming, the stack trace is getting printed onto the console? So that's a default kind of behavior that this particular logger by default has. But remember, even while we discuss exception handling, we said it's not a very good idea to display all the error message onto the console. Not a very good idea. So if you do not plan to display the error message onto the console, and that is a default behavior of the logger, then you will have to configure a logger. You will either have to remove this particular logger, or in addition to this logger, you will have to keep additional logger. And then we need to specify how it is going to log and what is it going to log. Listen to me very carefully. How is it going to log? What is it going to log? Both the things we could configure. So first and foremost, we need to have a handler. Just having a logger object is not enough. In addition to the logger object, we also require a handler. Now, if I have a handler, as the name says, in exception, we use this term handler. Handler was my response to that exception. So here, this handler is a response to the message that we have sent to the logger, which we expect to log. So handler will actually do the logging. Set the log level. There are different types of messages that we may have sent across. Every message that we send for logging has a level. Now, when I use the word level in simple words, like it could be error message, it could be a warning message, it could be a security message, it could be a configuration message. There are 9-10 levels of messages or error levels which are there, logging levels which are there. So we will set the level of the logger. So I'll say, what kind of message is this logger supposed to log, and what is it supposed to ignore? So that level of the logging has to be set. Always keep in mind, the logger should always have higher level than the handler, because you send a message to the logger and the logger level is lesser than the level of message that you have sent, the logger will not forward it to the handler. Okay. So logger should have a higher level. That means it should capture almost all the message and every message that you send to it. And then when you send it to the handler, you can configure a handler depending on what kind of messages do you expect that handler to handle. Some handlers you may expect should handle only warnings. Some handlers you may expect that they should handle only errors, severe errors. So I can have a logger which handles severe errors. I can have a logger which can handle the warnings. And accordingly, I could have configured and specified what type of errors, what type of messages can this particular logger log. So we need to set the log level. Optionally associating a filter with the logging object. Now that's something which is very interesting. Filters. I'm going to give you some very good, interesting examples of filter. Filter is like while you're logging, while the message is sent from the application to the handler, that means it goes from the application to the filter and to the logger and from logger to the handler. You can add a filter in between. Filter will at times, suppose the message is too big, would you not like to compress it, and or suppose the message is critical, would you not like to encrypt and then log? So we can add a filter, and that filter can take up any responsibility. Either it can mask some kind of confidential data, or it can compress the data. Whatever transformation that you want to carry out on the data before you get logs, I can specify it in the filter. So filter will filter the message before it gets logged. So we can add a filter as well. So how is the mechanism? We have a logging API. Using this logging API, we created a logger object, but that was not enough. With every logger object, we need to have a associated handler. And I said, even if you do not associate a handler, there is a default handler, which is a console handler, which is always there. But then with this logging API, the logger object that we have created, we have to set the logging level, log level for this logging API, the logger object. So once we create this logger object, few things that we need to do with this logger object. Get logger, say you create a logger object, associate a handler with that logger object, plus set the log level for the logger object. Also add optionally a filter with the logger object. So when you send the message to the logger will filter those messages and forward it to the handler. Forward it to the handler. Handler will actually do the operation of logging. Handler will do the actual operation of logging. Now, so we saw first was creating a logger. Second stage was we configured the logger object. We configured the logger object. And third, now when we said configuring, what all things we did? We associated a handler with it. We set the log level. If required, we set the filter also. So these were demonstrated. Now, while you're talking about associating a handler with the logger object, we said get logger. Where is the handler? How do I create a handler? How do I associate that handler with the logger object? Okay, so one logger object can have multiple handlers. It has one default handler always. You like it, you do not like it. You can remove it. That's a different issue. But it always has one default handler. And what is a default handler? It's a console handler, I said. And the basic behavior of console handler is to log the message onto the console, which may be good, but not always. In the real life applications, we would not want to log with the console. Rather, there may not be a console associated with the application. How many times you have now worked on console based terminal based APIs applications? Today, normally most of the time you will be working with GUIs, isn't it? So there may not be a console. So if there is no console, where will the message go? Isn't it? So we definitely need to have our own handlers. Handler is responsible for publication of the log messages. Although you may have sent that message successfully to the logger, it is not the logger which will actually publish the message. The actual publication of the message, that means displaying, writing, storing, whatever it is, logging of the message, is done by the handler. The responsibility includes specifying both the format of the output format and the output location, some common output location of console or file. So when we talk about this handler, the handler when we create a handler, we'll specify, should that handler display the message onto the console? Should it send to the socket? Should it write to the file? What should that how that logger should log, and in what format? Now, when I say what format, what do I mean by that? When I say what format, is it a plain text? Is it an XML file? In what format are we going to log? That is also something that we'll have to specify when you're creating that particular handler. There are so many handlers which are available. The stream handler, and there are three subtypes of stream handler: console handler, file handler, socket handler. And then there is a memory handler. As the name says, memory, in memory, not permanently stored. Stream handler, console, monitor; file, secondary storage device; socket, network. So you can send it in different handlers. So handlers, if you look at the class hierarchy, there are two major subtypes for handlers. One is a stream handler, there is a memory handler. And for stream handler, we have console handler, file handler, and socket handler. So these are the various subtypes that are there. But then, now that we understood there is a handler, we understood what are the specializations for handlers. Suppose I take a stream handler. Stream handler means one of those three types: console, file, or socket. Or I create a stream handler object or a console handler object. How do I associate that handler with the logger? Now for that, first let's talk about stream handler. For writing format record to the output stream object. Now when I say output stream is connected to output device. Means it can be used to send the data to the output device. So we have a console handler that can send the data to the system.err, which is always most of the time associated with your console. File handler that will send it to a single file or set of rotating log files. Now many of you may be having here we go. Many of you maybe having video cameras at your place, CCTV cameras. And you must have noticed in those CCTV cameras, whatever recording that happens every day, that definitely gets logged. That is recorded. So if somebody tells us in your society with some things, there is some robbery, then police comes down and they tell you, okay, show me the recording for that particular day so you can go back. Is it like you have recording for since the time when the machine has been installed, the CCTV camera has been installed? No, there is a limited capacity on the disk that you have. You may be having a record for 100 days, 200 days, whatever, 30 days or whatever it is. There is something called as rotating files. That means, oh, here you can either log that entire thing to one file, but there will be a capacity when the file becomes full, or you could have a set of rotating files. Say I have say 5 files, and every file can log record for 1 week. Suppose that big file I have. So first week, second week, third week, fourth week, fifth week. Now sixth week I do not have a sixth file, so it will overwrite the first file. So it will keep on using those rotating files as well. So there are different ways in which this rotate logging could have been done. So we also have a concept called as rotating files that will log, that will handle those scenarios for you. Here we go. Um, is the console visible? Is the presentation visible, everybody?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I cannot. Anyway, here you go. So we have this socket handler, we have this file handler, we have this console handler. There are various kind of handler, and we also have memory handler. So when you talk about socket handler, it will be sent to formatted records to a remote TCP port. That means I talked about console handler. Console handler was sending it onto the console. When I'm talking about file handler, it is sending the data into a file. It can be a single file or it can be a set of rotating files, the kind of example that I gave you for CCTV camera recordings that normally happens. Third is a socket handler that can send the data to a socket, to a network, to a port. So something happens on the client's machine, it can be reported to the developer's end. Your maintenance team will get a flash on the screen. Hey, something goes wrong with this client A. And before the client reports to you, without the knowledge of the client, we will proactively fix it his side. So client is very happy. System never fails. It actually failed, but we are proactively handling the client's problem. And then we have memory handler. We would like to store only in the memory as long as that application is running. So if you again revisit, we first need to create a logger object. To create the logger object, we require this logging API. Using this logging API, we create a logger object. To this logger object, I'll add a handler. And the handler can either be a stream handler, console handler, file handler, socket handler, memory handler, whatever it is. This handler is responsible for publishing the message. The handler, when we configure the handler, will specify what are the kind of messages that is to be logged, what is the format of this message, and what is the location where it has to log. All that information is what we will be specifying in the handler. Logger object will also have a log level. Handler will also have a log level. I told you logger should always have a higher level of handling logging than the handler, because every message there can be more than one handlers. Nah? So some handlers are responsible for handling one kind of messages, and some handlers are responsible for handling other kind of messages. So to add a handler to a logger, we have a method called as add handler. So logger objects add handler method is used to add handler to a logger. So first we used a method called as get logger that gave you a logger with a specified name. Now once you create a handler, and to create a handler we'll have to instantiate an object of either of those five loggers: stream, console, file, socket, या फिर memory. You create an object, and once you create that logger object, handler object, you can add it by using this add handler. The reference to the add handler is passed. The reference to the handler is passed as a parameter to the add handler method. If you look at it, what am I saying? Logger object is already created. Assume we said logger is equal to get logger some name, and logger dot get logger and some name. So we got this logger object. Now once I have got this logger object, I say logger object dot add handler new file handler foo.log. So I have given only one file. So this could be a file which can grow to whatever extent. We are not talking about it right now. So when I say new file handler, so we have created this foo.log. That's a file in which this file handler is going to log. So it's more like an output stream. All these handlers are like output stream. They will send the data to that particular stream. It is associated with a file. I could have given the path. It is associated with the file where the data will get logged. So new, I'm creating this handler. And this handler which has just now been created, I forgot to put one parenthesis over here. That's okay. You should excuse me. But this handler has been created, and that has been added to this particular logger by calling add handler. Default handler associated logger instance with a logger instance is stream handler. That's okay. But when you talk about setting the log levels, there are various levels which are there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh no, there are 9. So I'm saying severe is the highest, finest is the lowest. And I'm telling there are 9 levels. Why is it so? You'll understand. The logging API includes a level class that defines 7 log levels. These are the 7 log levels. But setting each level, we can achieve different depths of logging. Means if I set it to info, I mean info, warning, and severe. If I set it to fine, that means I mean fine, config, info, warning, and so on. So if you look at the level, these are the levels. So two more, which are the two more? One is all, another is off. Now these are already predefined log levels which are there, and you want to create a sub level between them. That's also possible, but normally I have not seen any requirement for doing that. This kind of categorization itself is good enough. So one can be log all, other can be log off. So if I say level is off, nothing, it will not log anything. But if I say config, if I say finer, finest, and so on. So if I say warning, what does it mean? Listen to me very carefully. If I set the level to warning, it will log warning and severe message both. So if I say all, it will log all of them. If I say config, it will log all of them. So it's like from lower to the higher. So 1 is highest and 7 is the suppose 7 ke baad ye suppose 7 is the lowest. So whichever level I set, this diagram I will check whether this is the same order or not. Okay, because I have missed over here, fine and finest over here. We'll check it out. But point is, if I set it to fine, means it will log fine, info, warning, severe both. All of them will be logged. Correct? So if I set it to severe, only severe will get logged. If I set it to warning, warning and severe, both of them will get logged. So we have to just check on the order. Off, turns off logging. On, enables all message login. Config, message level for static configuration message. You need to specify what kind of message it is. Indicates highly detailed messages. Finer indicates detailed tracing messages, and so on. It's just some information messages. If you have, say, info, warnings, so potential problems, severe, something which is very critical, you can set the various level. To control the publication of log message, you can perform the action as follows. Subclass the level class and add additional levels. I practically don't see any need to do that because 9 levels are good enough for us. The kind of message that we are trying to pass should fit in one of those 9 levels for sure. Set the log levels to the logger object. To the logger object, not just the logger object, I said to the handler as well. Set the log level of each handler associated with the logger object. So one logger can have multiple handlers. Say with one logger, I had 2 handlers. Logger level is set at the highest. So what will happen is it can log all the kind of messages. Say I say log all. So I am allowed to pass all the messages to the logger, but the handler are created differently. Some handlers are created only to log the severe message, and some handlers are created to log from fine onwards. So I'll send the message to the logger. Logger will forward that particular message to the handlers. Depending on the levels, log levels for the handlers will then go ahead logging those kind of messages, those additional messages. So understand, we need to set the log level. We need to set the log level for the handler as well as the logger. And keep in mind the logger's log level should be higher than the handler. Say you get the handler's level higher, but if the logger's level is lower, it will never forward the message to the handler. If the message doesn't come to the handler, what message is the handler going to publish? The uses of set level methods are as follows. Use set level method of the logger object to set minimum level at which the logger should publish the message. Minimum level at which it should publish the message. So I can say logger.set level level.info. Use set level method of the handler object to set minimum level at which the handler can publish the message. So with the logger we have set level, with handler also we have the same method called as set level. So I can say logger.set level, and as well as I can say handler.set level. So if I set the level for logger as info, I have set the level for handler as warning. That means the logger can log more messages, means it can receive more messages. Info kya kya hai, what all levels we had after info. Let's check it out quickly. We had the levels. After info, we have warning and severe. All those things are there. And here, when I'm saying the next one is only having warnings or only severe or only warning. So warning and severe message the handler can handle. Logger can forward the message to all other handlers which could have had the appropriate level. Now, when you talk about logging, I said the handlers are responsible for publishing. So when I said the handlers are responsible for publishing, means what? They decide two things. What to log? Okay. What to log is sent by the logger itself. Okay. But then it decides where to log and in what format to log. So to decide the format in which the message has to be logged, we have logging formatters. So formatters are used to format log message. So anytime you want to format a log message, we have the formatters which are there. We have these formatters which are there. As the name says, formatter, they are going to do the formatting. They will decide the format. And here we have primarily two formats. One is XML format and other is a simple format. So simple format, it just displays a simple text, okay, just text message with a basic information. Console handler uses this formatter to print log message to the console. Means what? Like I said, whenever you create a logger object, it has a default handler. So with every handler also, there is a default formatter which is there. With console handler, the default formatter is simple formatter, and with the file handler, the default formatter is XML formatter. So if I write the data to a file, it will not get written as a simple text. It will never get written as a simple text. When you send some data to a file, it will not get written as a simple text. Rather, it will be in XML format. And if I send it something to the console, it will not be in XML format. It will be in simple text. Remember, even in exception handling, when an exception stack trace is being printed, it is simple text one after another, one line after another that gets printed. Today we'll see XML formatting as well, but that's default. Does that mean console will always display the data in simple text? No, that's a default handler. Every logger, that's a default formatter. Every logger has a default handler, and every handler has a default formatter, and all of them can be changed. All of them can be changed. Then we talked about filter. I'm just giving you a brief about what all things is in store when I start with the demonstration, so that you are clear about what is that we need to look at. The filter is an interface in Java util.logging package. It is used to control messages to be logged by the handler. Messages to be logged by the handler. So you will filter the message. Now, when I use the word filter, you could filter based on some text that is there in the message. So it could scan the message and see, is there this kind of message which is there inside the text, and then I can filter. There can be different kind of filtering that we can do. I said any transformation that you want to do on the data before it gets logged, filter can be used for that. Every logger and handler can optionally have a filter. Filter has a isLoggable method which returns a boolean value, either true or false, and that value true or false will decide whether that message should be logged or not to be logged. Before publishing the message, logger or handler calls this method. If the method returns true, then it will get logged, otherwise it will not get logged. So it's not about compression. It's about this filter is taking this filter is telling you whether this message should be logged or not. Say in the log message there is some slang, some bad word. So if that message contains a bad word, I'll not log it. I could add a filter, check for slang, is loggable, will check whether is there a कोई गाली दी है क्या आपने तो message में. If there is some slang inside that particular message, I'll not log it. Or it could be the case like there is a word like critical hai. Oh, that means it is important. So if such kind of words are there in the message, I'll definitely log it. So whatever kind of filter you would like to create, you can create it. In addition to those filters and the formatters, we also have log manager. This is fantastic. Log manager is a class that reads logging configuration, creates and maintains logger instances. It would be a tremendous kind of problem for me in every application if I am required to configure the logger every now and then. So what I could do is I can have this log manager class that reads the logging configuration. That means the configuration I can store in a file. The log manager can read this configuration details about how do I want to log from the configuration file, and then accordingly set up the entire logging architecture for us. So once we create that particular file in which I have given all my configuration details, and for that entire application, that same file can be used. Anybody can read the configuration details from that file and set up the logging architecture based on it. We can use this class to set our own application specific configuration. That means it can be stored externally. You do not have to hard code inside the application how the logging should be done. What is the default handler? What level should be logged? What should be the name of the file? What kind of logger we'd like to use? Everything I can specify inside a text file, a separate file. And the log manager will look out for that file, read that file, configuration file, and it will set up the entire logging architecture based on whatever configuration details that you have supplied inside that particular file. It enables us to remove configuration from the code. That means this configuration details as to how the logging architecture is to be set up, that will not be present inside the code, rather it will be stored outside in a file. It enables us to remove the configuration from the code and provide easy way to reconfigure whenever it is required without changing the code. That means I have to change the logger, say from file handler, I want to send it to socket handler. Earlier, I was dumping the data into a file on some location. I wanted to send over the network on a port socket. I'll have to open up the Java code. I'll have to change the application, new logger, new file handler. I'll have to replace with new socket handler and so on. That would be difficult, isn't it? That means the code has to be edited, recompiled, relaunched, and so on. Instead, I have this configuration file. I'll make changes on the configuration file, relaunch the application once again. It'll read the data from this configuration file and set up the entire architecture depending on what handlers you would like to have, what should be logged, what not should be logged, what are the filters. All the details could have been given inside that file. So the configuration of my logger need not be done by calling those method add handler and get logger and nothing. Entire details could have been given inside a text file, and that text file could act as a configuration file as to how do you want the logger to work in this application. There are logging configuration file can be set up in two ways. A logging configuration file will be read at startup when the application start, specifying a class that can be used for reading the initialization properties. There are two ways. So there is one logging.properties file. Remember, in properties file, we have those key value combinations. So we can set the handlers, we can set the formatters, we can set the log levels, we can set the handler limit, we can set the handler count, everything. Key value is what we have to give. So summary, we have to create there is an application. Every application will have a logger. For every logger, there can be some parent logger, whatever is there, but we'll have to set the level. We'll have to optionally add a filter. When you talk about level, there are so many different levels which are there. When your application sends the message to the logger, the message could be any of these messages: severe, warning, info, config, fine, finer, finished, log p, log rb. There can be so many different kind of messages that can be sent to the logger. Logger, depending on the level, it will forward some messages to the handler. Handler will also have their own levels. They can optionally have a filter. They can also have a formatter. These handlers are the one, and the handler either could be console, stream, file, socket, memory. They are the one which will actually take the responsibility of publishing the message. With every logger, there is at least one default handler which is always there. But then you can change the handler. You can add a handler. With a logger, there can be multiple handlers with different levels and different filters and different formatters. So with the same logger, I can have a console handler, a file handler, and socket handler. Everything can be there. So that was a brief introduction to this concept of logging. I hope you have understood what I have discussed so far. Before I go with the demonstration, give me a quick feedback whether you understood whatever we have discussed. And use the chat window. There is a lag between what is being currently broadcasted, so I cannot hear what your messages are immediately. Use the chat. So anybody has a query, you can use the chat and type the message in the chat. Any message? Anybody? Any query before I go to the demonstration? Now we still have, yeah. Okay. Rohan's question is logging configuration read at the startup and at startup and no. So configuration will always be read only at the startup when the application starts, because when that configuration, the logger manager object we create, that time we have to specify which is the configuration file. So it will be read only once when the application starts, or it should ideally be read when the application starts. Ideally, we can do it anytime. You can, but best action would have been when the application start. Right from the time when the application start, we would like to log the activities. We also log activities, not just errors. So it's always better when the application gets launched. At that time only the configuration should be read, but you could read it in any time. Any other question, anybody? Please use chat today. Don't unmute your mic and ask the question. Any question? Rohan is saying, can logger object level can be higher than the handler? I said logger objects level should always be higher than the logger handler. Can the handler have a level higher than the logger? They can have, but does it make a sense? Look at this. I have a logger which forwards the message to the handler. If a logger has a lower level, it will not forward the message to the handler, which may have a higher level. If the message doesn't reach the handler, what is it going to log? So your logger should always have a level which is higher than the handler, because message first comes to the logger, and from the logger forwards that message to the handler, and handler publishes it. But logger ne filter kar diya, the message will not reach the handler, and if it doesn't reach the handler, what is it going to log? So there is no point in having a handler with a higher level than that of logger, because logger is not going to forward that message to him. Any other question, anybody? Please use chat window today. This is we are doing for a trial because now we'll go with a hybrid mode. So I just want to test for today. Some of you could also check on YouTube whether there is means whether it's all okay or not. Give me feedback after the lecture. How is it running on YouTube as well? Okay, check it on YouTube because I cannot do both the things simultaneously. I request you to check it out and I expect you to give me a feedback. So next week probably we'll have offline and online sessions both together. But now there is one problem that I identified over here. While I'm conducting the session, what I can hear is something that I spoke 5 minutes back. So there is a lag. Okay. So let's see as to how some of you can help me out, how it can be real time. Okay. Anyway, let's proceed further with the demonstration. Now that we have understood this, let's take up some example to understand how this logging architecture could be actually be established. So let's start with this very interesting topic called as logging. And although many of you are not aware of socket programming, I still use one example over here and show you how it can be sent it across to the network and so on. Or after socket programming, when I discuss socket programming, that time I can take error will be on my machine and output will be on your machine. That's something that we could do. Means message could get published on your machine. We could do that. And I normally demonstrate the same thing in the classroom as well. Any more question, anybody? Jay, tell me about it later. I don't know what is how to set it. Latency to low before starting live stream. I don't know about it. Thank you. I'll check it out what it means. It's the first live streaming that I'm doing in my life. So maybe there is some concerns. Let's begin with a demonstration. Here we go. We'll take some simple examples. The simplest example first. Here we go. Just understand the sequence of operation that we are trying to do. Okay, there will be a lot of comments, but don't really worry about it. We have this static method called as getLogger. I have imported all the things that I need. The file handler, the level, the logger, and so on. So don't worry. First is create the logger. That is the first step that we had to do. First create a logger. So what I'll do is I'll change it and then we'll go ahead. First create a logger. How do I create a logger? You use a static method called as getLogger from the logger class, and I pass the name that I would like to log, just the name to the logger. It's a good practice to give the name of that of the class of the package. Here I given the class because my application is single file application. So I given, okay, this is the name of the logger. You could have given any other name as well. So logger object has been created, but with every logger, there is a handler that will handle it. So I plan to create a handler. I'll show you an example where I do not create a handler and still will get logged, but I create a handler. I say new console handler. So when I say new console handler, it's just saying cannot find that. So I import that API. So I say new console handler. So I first create a logger, then I create a handler. Now I would like to add this handler to my logger. I'd like to add this handler to the logger. So I say logger dot add handler, a handle. So this handler has now been added to my logger. So first step was create the logger. So I created the logger. Second is create the handler. I created a handler. I added the handler to the logger. I added the handler to the logger. Now, once I have added the handler to the logger, I need to set the level. So I say logger dot set level all. So logger is going to log all the levels. currently I have a handler. I have set the level of the handler also to all. So both, don't worry about this commented code, just focus on what is being highlighted. First we created a logger, then we created a handler. Don't worry about the default handler, we created a handler, that's a console handler. Console handler send the message to system.out.system.err, that's normally to the console. I added the handler to the logger. I set the level of the handler all. I set the level of the logger also to all. Listen, also to all. And I now start logging the messages. And I have logged all the kind of messages. I say logger.severe. That's a severe message. Logger.warning, logger. Oh, what is this logger.log? For a moment, excuse me, I'll not tell you about these two lines. Let me tell you about other methods. There is a method called a severe, warning, info, config, log, finer, finest. Oh, there are different levels. So this message that I'm sending over here, it will assume that this message is a severe message. This message I'm sending over here, it will assume it's a warning message. But you do not want to call these different methods. So what you could do, you could just say logger.log, correct? You could specify what's the level of the warning, level of the message, and the message. So you have two choice. Either you say logger.warning and send your message which is a warning message, or you say logger.log, specify the level of that message that is to be logged and the message. So here I said warning. It is not just warning, you have all the levels. If I look at this, it has config, finer, finest, info, all the levels are there, all levels are there. So two choice, either you call a method whose name is the same as that of the level, or I say logger.log, pass the level and the message that you would like to log. So I have logged almost all the levels. And note, the handler and the logger are configured to log all the message. And how many messages I have sent? Let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 messages I have sent across. So let's run this particular code and see onto the console, what do you get? So when I'm saying line message, it is giving me the first is a severe message generated. It's not just telling us that, it's telling us when is that message generated. That's a bonus for us, maybe. Then we have this severe message once again. Are, how come I have two severe message while in I have sent across only one severe message? Isn't it? I have sent only one severe message. Can you see that? Have I sent two severe message? Yes or no? We have
No.
sent only one severe message. So although we have sent one severe message, we have sent 9 messages. Let's see how many messages have been displayed here. 1, 2, okay, count. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. How is it that I have 13 messages are being displayed? Now let me reveal the truth for you. With every logger, there is a default handler, correct? That default handler is a console handler, stream handler that also uses console handler that is logging the message. But the way it has been configured is differently, and the way we have configured our handler is differently. So what I do is I remove this default handler. Watch it. I have removed a default handler. So I do not have a handler. Practically, I do not have a handler. I have a logger, correct? And I have logger ka level is all, and I'm logging all the messages. Now watch it. Have I added any handler? No. But point is, there is a default handler. Now let's count and see how many messages are being displayed. We have severe, warning and info. What about other messages? We had finer, config, all those messages that had not been displayed. So in addition to those 9, these were the additional messages that had got logged. Why? Because the default handler, which is a console handler, its level has been set to info by default. By default, every handler has a level. So my loggers level, listen, my loggers level is all. So ideally it should have logged all the messages. But what did I tell you? It is not the responsibility of the logger to actually publish the message. It is you send the message to the logger. Look at this. We are saying logger.severe, logger.log. So we are sending the message to the logger. But the logger forwards the message to the handler. And it is the handler which actually takes up the responsibility of publishing that message. It is the handler which takes up the responsibility of publishing that particular message. So while the handler is publishing that message, the default handler is a console handler. So we got that message, and the level which is set for the default handler is the level that is set to the default handler is info. So it has not logged all the messages. I hope you understood what I'm trying to say. So if console is the default handler, let's not worry about the console handler. Let's take file handler. Suppose if I take a file handler. Now, if I take a file handler, I'll have to import it. So I take a file handler. I add that handler to the logger and I set the level to all. Now things are different. So we have console handler, its level is set to info. So after info, if you look at this message levels that we had, after info we have warning and severe. Can you see the message over here? Is the PowerPoint presentation visible, everybody?
No, sir.
Oh, I cannot hear you anyway. Here, if you look at these levels, we had oh, chat window. Now is it visible? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Here, if you look at this, the default level that is set to the console handler is info. So info, warning, and severe, all of them were locked. That was the default handler. That was the default handler. Now we are talking about our file handler. And for the file handler, I have now said file handler is not the default handler. The default handler is console handler. So by default, the message is getting displayed onto the console, but only info, warnings, and severe. Only those messages have got locked. Now I have a file handler that's going to log the data to log.xml. In case if I have a file called as log.xml, let me get rid of that particular file. Let me get rid of that file. In case if there is any such file, this is not the program that we are looking at. We are looking at simple logger. There is a file called as log.xml. Oh, we no longer have any file called as log.xml. Watch it. There is no such file inside this application. I'll run this particular code again. Now, Rohan's question is very good. He says, why is it displaying once again? Array, a logger can have more than one handlers, and the handlers that are there can be of same type of different type. So if I create a logger, it already has a console handler. You create one more console handler. So there are two console handlers which are there. It's not like the only one that you have given is logging. There are two console handlers which are there. Does that answer your question, Rahul, now? If I create a logger and I create a console handler, so you don't have one console handler, you have two console handlers. And two console handlers have different level. Okay, quickly tell me, the console handler supplied by default to us has in a level. That's right, info. And the one that we had created, we had given level as all. That's correct, Sanket. That's correct. The one that we had created, we had set the level as all. So what happened over there, when I had set the level to all, let's just repeat it quickly. Here we go. We had created a console handler. We created a console handler. We added that handler and we added the handler and we set the level all. So when we ran this particular application, when we executed this particular application, what really happened over here, I should first have imported it. Cancel. Let's import it. When we have this console handler, so if you notice, finest, finer, this has been handled by the logger that we created. But then when I talk about severe two times, warning two times, warning two times, four times, whatever it is, and info two times, why is this? This is because one is by our handler that we have created, this handler that we have created, and one is by the default handler. So there are two handlers doing that operation. Let's not do that. Let's not do that. I'll show you how to remove the default handler as well. Not necessarily that it will always should log on to the console. No, I don't want a default. I can remove a default handler as well. But here, what is doing is we are adding additional handler. We have not removed the default handler. I have not yet shown you how to remove the default handler. So now we get a logger. Okay, get logger is a static method that will create a logger with this name. We create a new file handler. Okay, that's a handler that will log the data to a file called as log.xml. Note, we don't have any such file in this application called as log.xml. I set the level of the handler to all. I set the level of the logger also to all, and I publish these messages. 9 messages is what I publish. Watch it. If you look at the console, there will be only 3 levels messages: info, warning, warning, and severe. Warning, why is it being displayed 2 times? Because I called this warning message this way and another message warning level message this way. So that was displayed. So we got severe, warning, warning, info. Only these messages were logged onto the console by the default handler. What about the file? Look, there is a new file that has got created. And if you check the properties of this file has got created today itself, 16th of February, so and so, this file has got created. Okay, let's open up this particular file and see, what has happened. Let me check. Let's run this particular example once again. Let's rebuild and run this example. I'll clean build in case if there is any corruption. Let's see what all things have we done. We have created a file called as log.xml. We have set the level. We have set the level for the logger, for the handler, and then we have logged all the message. Let's run this application. Here on the console, only till info, warning and severe. In the file, what's wrong with the file? Let me just check what's going wrong. I'll delete this file. I'll clean build this particular application. Clean. Unable to delete file. Simple log dot jar. Okay. It seems there is some problem. Let me go to that location. Clean build. That's the location from where it could not delete a file. I'll check it out. What's the problem? I have forcefully deleted it. Now let's clean this application. Window, output, success. Now let's build this application. Oh. Right button click, properties, JDK 8 nahi hai, this is JDK 11, libraries JDK 11. Done. Clean and build, and we execute. Console to aa gaya. File should also be there. Strange, something weird is happening. Let me just check. New file handler log1.xml. I'll keep it on some other drive, d:\log. Let's keep it on some other file. Sometimes there are some issues regarding permissions on C drive. I set the level and I publish the message. I clean build and I run. Let's go to the drive. Let me share the screen with you. On D drive, we are expecting a file called as log1, and surprisingly the file size has come out to be 0. Let me check. We had added the handler, na? Oh, we did not add the handler. Here we go. Very good. That was a mistake. So we create a file handler. We need to add the handler and then we need to log. Okay, that was a bug. So it's always good to do programming in pair. Who answered that thing? Okay, so silly mistake, but mistake is a mistake. Here we go. Now let's have a look over here. So I forgot to add the handler. Now we go to D drive. Need not go to D drive actually. And there is a file which has now been created. Watch it. If I open up this file, let's open up this file in Notepad++. Let's open up this file in Notepad++. And when I open up this file in Notepad++, watch it. Here we go. Can you see it, everybody? So we have the records, the first record, the second record, the third record, the fourth record, fifth record, sixth record, seventh record, eighth record, ninth record. All records I got locked. Watch it. The first one was severe. Can you see this? Severe. This is the logger who I logged it. Sequence में इसका number 0 है. How much time, when it has taken, exact time, which class, function main में से log किया गया है, and the message. So because of these tags which are there, later parsing will become very easy. And one of the last message that has got logged was again the finest level message. And what was the message? Oh, this was the message. Likewise, there is another message that we had logged, the final message, whatever message that we had passed. Another way to log the final message and so on. This level is fine. So if I want to know only the fine, I can parse this particular file and find out which are the fine messages, which are the warning messages, which are the severe messages, and so on. And this was like number of milliseconds from the epoch and everything. Okay, a time zone ke saath information, everything is there. So we had logged it. Okay, it was a silly mistake that I did. I had forgot to add the handler, and that was an order. What all things we need to do? First, we create a logger. Second, we create a handler. So it need not specify the path. It will still work. Log.xml. It will still work. So if I say log, add that handler to the logger, set the level for the handler as well as for the logger, and then log it. Now what I'll do is, as Rohan had asked a question, I'll set the level higher. So if you look at this log.xml, all the log messages have got logged. Look at that. And even with the number from 0 to 8, that means 9 messages have got logged. Okay. Now what do? I set the level of the handler all, and the logger, I set the logger level to, suppose, fine. If I set the logger level to fine, let me not say fine, let me just say info. Logger level is info, handler is all. Handler is in a position to handle every message that you send. But it will log only if the loggers forwards the message. So if I now run this particular code on the console, to 3 aa gaye. Let's look into the file, how many messages have got logged. Let's look at the last one. Iska level number kya hai? Sequence number 3. Only 4 messages have got logged. Only 4 messages have got logged. Watch it. Sequence 0, that's the first message, second message, third message, and the fourth message. कौन से message log हो गए? Info, warning, warning, and severe. Same thing which were logged onto the console. So there is no point in having handler a higher level than the logger. Then the logger, where? Here, then the logger. Logger is having info. That means our message first goes to the info handler, logger. Logger sees the, if it's in within its own level, only then it will forward it to the handler. So if the data is not forwarded, message is not forwarded by the logger to the handler, what is the handler going to log? So no point in having a level of the handler more than the level of the logger. No point. It will not serve any purpose. I do it other way around. This was still suppose config. Which are levels we have? We have fine tak hai. Okay, fine. So this was supposed till fine, and this was all. Logger is all. Handler is still fine. That's okay, na? So logger is forwarding all the messages to the handler. Now it is for the handler to decide amongst them what is it supposed to log. So let's look at the last number 6. That means it has not logged 6, 7, 8, 9, 7, 8. 2 messages it has not logged. Which are the 2 messages it has not logged? The finest and finer. Those are 2 messages it has not logged. Look at this. We have fine, we have fine, we have config, we have info, we have warning and severe. So the only message that did not get logged was the finer and the finest. They have not got logged. That's okay. So that's how you could work with it. Although this application was not designed properly, but it was just meant to understand the sequence of operations. I'll show you later how to do actual exception handling, how to create a proper logger. But this was just to understand the sequence. Create a logger, create a handler, add the handler to the logger, set the label for the handler as well as the logger, and then keep on forwarding the messages as and when in your application wherever you want. So for this entire application, this handler has now been in this application, this handler, the logger has been configured. So in the application, whenever you say logger, your my log a logger or this, it will start logging the things. So I hope you have understood this basic idea as to how to do the logging. Okay, give me a quick feedback. समझ में आया नहीं आया? Chat window में दीजिएगा. हाँ, reaction भी चलेगा. Reaction also I can see. Good. Okay. It was simple, isn't it? But we have not yet seen the power. How exception handling, how will we use it? We'll have seen that. So today we'll just try and keep it simple. We'll just try and focus on the basic idea. So we understood the basic idea, how to create it. And wasn't it so simple? The complex of the message was XML file was automatically created for us. Let's look at one more example. Here, I'm going to try and create something meaningful. I have a class that I have created called as logging exception. Let's quickly look at this application oriented example. Because when there is an exception, I would like to log it. So I say I have a logging exception that extends exception. It's a very good idea. If it's an exception, which is a kind of logging exception, it will get logged. That's what my idea is. So when you create some user defined exception, you can say my user defined exception is a kind of logging exception, so it will automatically get logged. So it has a message called as logger. The handler, it has a handles handler. It has two handlers. Okay, there is a logger and there are two handlers. Both of them are static. Okay, that's okay. But this handler is going to handle only severe messages, and this handler is going to handle all the messages. Okay, it just you could select only one. Huh? There is a static block. And remember, static blocks are loaded when the class gets loaded. Yeah, they're like constructor for your class. I hope you all recollect. Huh? Static board blocks like constructor for your class. Think about them. When the class gets loaded, this block will get loaded in the memory. Yeah? And just for your understanding, I'm just going to print this message. ताकि हमें पता चले कि we had this class has got loaded. I create a logger. I create a logger. Using this logger, I set the level of the logger to all. I create two handlers. One is a file handler, other is also file handler. But one handler is a file called as log.xml that's going to handle all. And another is severe handle, log all. I'll call this as log all XML. And there is severe XML. So there are two handlers that I have. Like in the first example, we had two console handlers. Now we have two file handlers. I have set the level of the log all to all and the handle severe to severe. And these are final variables. These are final static final variables can be initialized. They're static variables. They can be initialized in the static code block. And then I add both of them, both the handlers to the logger. Correct. This is only for your information. The logger handlers have been created. And I print the information about the handlers which are there. So how many handlers should it print? Give me a quick feedback. Here, when I print all the handlers, I say logger.get handlers. It will give me array of handlers. And I'm going to run through array of handlers. How many handlers will it give me? Give me a quick feedback. Some of you got it right. Some of you got it wrong. It is not two. It will be three. Okay. I hope you by now you must have understood. Two to we have added. One handler is always there. A console handler which is always there. Console is also going to be there. So there are three handlers which are there. That's it. And there is a constructor for this. So nothing. I have kept these handlers ready now. I have kept these handlers ready. These are private members which are there. Oh, what am I going to do with this? There is one method over here called as do logging. Okay, and there is a method called as do log. When I use this method do log, whatever exception object that I pass, I take the stack trace and I print entire stack trace for each element from this of type stack trace, from this array of stack trace. I get every message and I'm going to log that message. So for each row that from the stack trace. Okay, get stack trace will give me the entire stack trace and I'm going to log all those messages as find message. I'm going to log them as find messages. In addition to that, just for sake of understanding what it logs and everything, I have generated these 9 messages. 9 hai kya? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Finer, fine, warning. Oh, some of the messages I have missed out. Anyway, but almost all the levels I have covered up and I have just given some messages over here. Fine, that's a logger that I have. This logger has a method called as do logging. That's just to show you how to log. It should always be the message that I pass over here should get logged. And here I have do log that can log the entire stack trace that otherwise gets displayed onto the console. I have some method application. My function main starts. There's a function foo that has been called. There's a function foo that has been called. I come to function foo. Foo calls bars. I come to function bars and bars throws some exception. Bars throws some exception. Now, if bars throws an exception, it will be caught over here, isn't it? How? In Java, it is automatically proposed. It will go to the caller. Caller doesn't have a handler, exception handler. So it goes to its caller. There is a handler. It will catch. It's not a very good idea to catch all, but then it catches. And what do? I create a new object of type logging exception. And I say do.logging and log.dolog में a exception object pass करूँगा. Inside, instead of saying e.print stack trace. So when I say do log over here, in this logging, it's going to print the entire stack trace. It's going to log. But who can log? Find messages कौन log कर सकता था? Both the handlers are not going to hand. One is all, other सिर्फ severe message handle log करने वाला था. So if I run this particular code, when exception occurs, oh, before that it has given me only 2 handlers. Or it should have given me 3 handlers. Rather, it has given me only 2 handlers. But although it has given me only 2 handlers, note, I did not ask it to display onto the console. Even the data has still got displayed onto the console. That means there is a console handler which is still into action. The get handler method has not given me the default handler. It has only given me the handlers that we have configured. But then the console handler has logged the message onto the console. We did not ask it to log, but important thing is 2 files being created. Let's look at those 2 files. One is log all.xml, another is severe.xml. One is log.xml, another is log all.xml, another is severe.xml. If you look at the severe message, there is only one message which is there. Sequence number 8 में severe message pass किया था आपने. Let's have a look at it. Eighth message था क्या अपना यहाँ? Eighth message 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. क्या बात है? जीरो से ना, 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. That was a severe message that has got logged. Watch it. Only that message has been logged by the severe logger. Okay, let's keep this aside. We also had a logger called as log all. So if you look at log all, what all messages has it handled? First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7, 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 and 12. क्या बात है? 12. How come 12? Let's count 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 and 12. Why 12? I'll explain you. Because these are the 8 messages, and in addition to that, when I say do log this is also getting logged. So entire stack trace has been logged. Let's check the stack trace. So here it has checked the stack trace. So in the do log method, okay, here it says on line number 12 in your program, on line number 12 in our program, I called foo. Watch it. Huh? On line number 12 in the program, I called foo. From line number 12, the control went to, here we go, second message, line number 24. Let's check it out. From line number 12, control went to line number 24. Can you see that? Line number 24. Okay. From line number 24, the control went to, it has logged everything. Huh? Control went to the method line number 28 inside this method called as bars. Is that right? Line number 28 inside, and there it threw an exception. Has everything got logged? Okay, the entire story has got logged. So the stack trace that would have otherwise been printed onto the console, that has now been logged. So ये ऊपर वाले जो है, they are the default messages, but this stack trace has got printed, and this entire story is being line number 12. You call inside function main, you have called method foo. The foo method calls method bars over here. Foo has been called on line number 24. From method main, you call foo on line number 12, and from foo you are calling bars. So in the bars method at line number 28, there's an exception. Entire stack trace has now been printed, stored inside a file. So now if you are a maintenance guy, okay, and you get to see the stack trace, not that it was displayed on the console and user has not taken a snapshot of your screen, of the screen, doesn't really bother you now, isn't it? Doesn't really bother you now, because what has happened now, the data has got logged in a file. When client reports to you, or even before the client reports to you, you can get the whole remote of his machine, can check this log. You'll understand what was the sequence, what was the operation that was happening, and then you can take a corrective action. Isn't it a wealth of information for you as a developer? You're having enough information that will help you to take whatever corrective action that you have to take while you are logging that particular thing. When you're logging that particular thing. So that was a brief about logging. I gave you an example as to what that logging is all about, and I showed you some basic things about logging. We use two loggers, right, handlers right now. One is a file handler, another is a console handler. But we haven't yet checked about the filters, the log manager, and anything. And that is what I'll cover up during the next session. Give me a quick feedback whether you understood today's session, whether you like today's session, whatever it is. Give me a quick feedback. Okay. So thank you all for attending session, and thanks for the wonderful feedback. We continue with the discussion of this, and we cover up those advanced topic. What is the advanced concept that we're going to now look at? The log manager, the filters, how can we filter some messages, and the other handlers also which are there. Why not explore those handlers as well? So next time when we meet, we explore those things. Thank you for attending the session. See you next time. Love you all. Bye-bye. Good night.
So can I ask a question now?
Yes, please.
So you'd given an example of the CCTV cameras.
Huh.
So can we make it a little more efficient? Like now we have computer vision and all. So if there is no movement going on in the camera, then it does not keep recording like that part. But as soon as it tracks a movement,
But that has nothing to do with the logger.
yeah, not with the logger, just in like general.